Hello, everybody. It's Stephanie K from Unveiling the Spirit, and today I'm going to unveil the Spirit from my Ask Stephanie K platform, which is a place on my website that you can go to and submit questions to me if you want a spiritual perspective on the answer. And so, a question was submitted to me about a week or so ago from a lady named Cynthia in Chicago, who asked me, how do you know your husband when you meet him? And so I want to unveil the Spirit about that and try to answer that question, because it's not an easy question to answer. If you come across anyone who is trying to give you these simplistic rules about, how to answer that question, I will be kind of leery of that, because people are different, circumstances are different, and then a lot of times when God does stuff and He's involved, it's not usually what we can anticipate or expect anyway. So it's not a clear-cut answer to the question, but I think there's some important points to keep in mind while you're waiting, so that the devil doesn't use your waiting to set traps for you. And because this happens a lot to women, and this happened even to me. And so I want to try to answer this question, give you some points here, and then hopefully Cynthia can get something from it that she can use, and anybody else who's watching this video. Okay, so before I go, like I said, I have 3 points, and the 3 points that I want to address. But before I go into those 3 points, I want to just say I have a couple thoughts about relationships that I think is important that kind of can go with my points. And so the first thing is, I guess, it's kind of myth about relationships, because when you're praying for a spouse and you're waiting for a spouse, sometimes, even if it's spoken or unspoken, that there is this idea that there's a such thing as a soulmate. I do not believe that there's any such thing as a soulmate. If you think about it, there's no indication in the Bible that anything like that exists. And again, like I was about to say, when you think about it, it kind of takes away from our choice. And so God is all about free will and giving us our choice to choose what we want. We can choose Him if we want. We don't have to. He's given us these tools in this body and this mind, but it's up to us what to do with it. So a soulmate would imply that God has already made that choice for you. And so that's why I do not believe that there's a soulmate, like this one particular person that God created for you before you even born, that one day you guys are going to meet up and sparks are going to fly. And I don't think that. I think that's a little bit romanticized idea of meeting someone, and then again, like I said, it takes away our choice. I think it's your choice if you want to get married. God has no problem with it either way, which Paul kind of explained in his letters, that it's basically your choice. God just wants you, whatever you choose, to do it right. And so and then another thing is that I think is important to point out is that even if you want to get married, it's not necessary that you pray for a spouse. You can choose who you want to marry for yourself. The only kind of guidelines that the Bible gives about us choosing a spouse is just to make sure that they're in the Lord, make sure that they're a Christian, make sure you're not unequally yoked. Other than that, it's your choice who you want to marry. But I do believe that God expects you to use some wisdom in that. And one of the main things that He knows that will be a good springboard for that marriage is that both you guys are believers. And so I don't think it's a special person that you're meant to be with. And I don't necessarily think you have to pray for a spouse. You have to ask God for a spouse. If you want to get married, you can choose someone for yourself. And so, but of course, there's a lot of people, there's nothing wrong with asking God for a spouse. And there's a lot of people who want help finding a spouse and to choose someone with wisdom. And God has no problem with helping us with that also. So, I mean, it's just like your father. If you go to your father and say, hey, Dad, can you help me find someone to spend the rest of my life with that loves me? Of course, he's going to say, sure, I will do that. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with asking God for a spouse, but at the same time, you don't necessarily have to. You just have to use wisdom and the criteria that He gives us to make sure we marry believers when you do that. And so those are a couple of things I wanted to address before I get into my 3 points. Oh, but let me say this really quickly. I do think that some people, because the Bible talks about the gift of singleness. So if there's a gift of singleness, then there must be a gift of marriage. And so I do think that some people have a desire to be married because God knows that marriage will be beneficial to them. But it's still their choice they want to get married or not. I think some people have the gift of singleness, which means they don't have a strong desire to get married, but it's still their choice if they want to remain single or married or not. It's not. So God gave us the desire for some things to kind of help us follow his will for our lives, but it's still our choice to choose. And when it comes to marriage, being married or single, there's no sin in it. It's just a matter of personal choice. And then make sure you're not sinning no matter what choice you do make. So but to get to my 3 points, one thing is that's important to keep in mind is that if you do pray to God for a spouse, his criteria for choosing your spouse or matching you with someone is going to be totally different from, not totally different, but usually pretty different from what you're expecting, just because he's all knowing, he's all knowledgeable, and things like that. So he's usually outside of what we think. And so a lot of the times, like even when I was single, I've heard women say, write down the type of husband that you want and put it in your Bible and pray. And I really don't think God is in the fast food order husband business. This is not have it your way. God, I want this, and this, and then God produces this man for you, So I don't necessarily think that's bad to do, because it kind of encourages you and gives you hope. But at the same time, I think it's really highly unrealistic and kind of feeds into women's fantasies about marriage that's not really realistic. And so I do talk about some of these things in my book, God, Why Am I Not Married? 9 Reasons Why You Might Still Be Single. I talk about how we have a lot of superficial ideas about marriage and who we choose for a spouse, and then just marriage in general. But I believe it's reason 6 or 7 that I talk about this stuff, maybe even 8 also. But anyway, I go through that more deeply in the book if you're interested in my perspective on that. So anyway, what I was saying was, God's criteria for our choosing a spouse for us is going to be much different than what we're thinking. Like in our limited human minds, and worldly minds, we want a husband that has good credit. We want a husband that's established. We want a husband that's Mr. Super Romantic, certain height, certain features. God is, he's not against giving you those things, but first and foremost, any of his criteria for who he sends to you is going to have to do with your growth. He's going to send someone in your life that's going to help you grow, period. If he's short and you want somebody tall, but he can help you grow, the tallness is not that important. If you want someone with A1 credit and he has bad credit, but he can help you grow, God is going to send someone that's going to help you grow. I mean, I think we even have to be careful of, like some women who say they want a man that's established when the purpose of a wife is to help a man get established. Like if you come into the picture after he's already done everything, then what type of helpmeet are you being when you're just reaping the benefits of the hard work that he's already done? Our job is to help him do whatever it is that God has called him to do. And so you can't do that if you're expecting him to be already established before you get married. So anyway, that's just a couple points about that. Like I said, I go more into that in my books. And so anyway, I just wanted to point out that God is going to choose someone for you that helps you grow, that helps you reach your destiny and your potential and your purpose. And that's the main purpose for marriage in itself. And again, I talk about that in reason 2 of my books, the main purpose for marriage and why God created it and things like that. So anyway, after saying all of that, I want to now go into my 3 points. So, and these are just some things that you can keep in mind, because like I said, there is not a clear-cut answer to how you know, like if you know your husband, when you see him, he'll have this, this, and this. There's really no answer to that, because only God knows what you need to grow. And like I said, there's so many variables in those situations that it's hard to cover all of those things and bring them down to like 3 points. But I do have some points that I think are important to keep in mind while you're waiting, and that can only help you to not only choose the right person, but grow spiritually in the process. And so one of the things which I mentioned before, I kind of hinted at this before, is that he has to be a Christian. I think this is where a lot of women get in trouble. And when I was single, myself included, we make all these allowances and compromises when we really want to be with someone. when they're not a Christian, that we get into trouble. And it's just that simple. And I'm not talking about someone who goes to church on Sunday and then on Monday they smoke, or on Wednesday they curse, and then they don't live the lifestyle. I'm saying they don't have to be perfect, but they definitely have to be sincere. And a lot of times we know the difference. We just put our blinders on to get what we want because we want the guy. And so you have to be very, very steadfast about that whoever you choose has to be a Christian. Not only will that save you a lot of heartache and time, but it will make you more focused on what God's will is for you. You won't really go outside of God's will too much, even accidentally, if you keep that as your focus. A lot of times women have this idea that they're going to save the man or win him over to Christ and things like that. Even if you meet a man and you guys, there's a possibility that you might end up married in the future. If he's not serving God or has come to that place where he knows God, then he may not be ready. And so you coming in trying to make him ready is not, you're trying to do God's job, and you can't do God's job. You need to take a step back. Maybe if it's possible to maintain a friendship or whatever, but don't try to rush the process, because the process is needed. And so that's not necessarily to say that any guy you meet that's not a Christian, you can X him off the list, but just be leery of that and careful of that. And keep that in your mind, because if he's not to a certain point in his spiritual growth yet, he's not going to be a good husband to you. I don't care what he says or how he acts in the beginning. Skeletons come out, the real person comes out, demons come out, and you find out that that person who was Mr. Romantic in the beginning is not as all put together as you thought. So he needs to have God in his life so that he can not only be the type of husband that he needs to be to you, but also so that he will be ready for the commitment of marriage. And so that's the first thing. He has to be a Christian. Make sure you keep that in the forefront of your mind, and keep your eye open to see if he's actually living a Christian lifestyle, or if he's saying one thing and doing something different. So that's the first thing that's very, very important. Another thing is the second pointer that I want to bring is that he has to be interested in you. Now, I'm saying this because I have seen many, many women claim that God told them that certain men was their husbands, even other women's husbands was their husband. If the man is not showing interest in you, which a married man shouldn't be showing interest in you anyway, because that X's out the first point, which is he must be a Christian. I will question that, but is that he has to be showing interest in you. I've seen all too many times women claiming that men are their husbands, and the man is not really showing much interest in them, and they're waiting and pining over a guy that God never said that about. Like, you have to, as much as you walk by faith and not by sight, there should be some things in the physical that confirm, that gives you some confirmation to move forward. Now, if God told you a man was your husband and he's not showing any interest in you whatsoever, then that is not your husband. And I'm not even talking about, because I just said a few minutes ago, not showing any interest in you whatsoever. You guys may be friends, so I mean romantic interest in you. If he's trying to pursue you, I'm a little bit old-fashioned in saying that a woman should not be pursuing a man. A man should be pursuing a woman. And so when a man does the pursuit, then you know he's ready. If he's not pursuing, he's not ready. And if you try to force a man into a relationship or bombard him with a commitment he's not ready for, guess who's going to end up hurt in the end? It's going to be you. So you wait until he's ready. Wait till he's pursuing you. If he's showing romantic interest in you, if he's not, I don't care how many times God says, that's my husband, wait. You know, that may not necessarily mean you're wrong, but it's, again, back to the first point, it's not time. He's not ready. So if God told you a man is your husband, that doesn't mean for you to put on your running shoes and start chasing him. That means sit back and wait and let the man come to you. Okay? So that doesn't mean be mean or anything like that, but don't start pursuing the man romantically unless he's giving the initiative on that. So that's the second point. The third point that I want to bring about is, and it goes back to what I said in the beginning, this is when you get to the point of like actually maybe dating, talking, you and a guy getting close. what type of effect does he have on you? Does he inspire you or push you to be a better person? Because God is all about growth, spiritual growth, emotional growth, mental growth. He's all about growth. So he's going to bring someone into your life, like I said earlier, that's going to help you grow. So if this guy is inspiring you to grow in the Lord, or inspiring you to mature emotionally, or inspiring you to mature mentally, then I think that that's a good indicator that he could possibly be from God. But again, you have to be careful. The main ingredient to know if someone is for you or not is for you to stay open to God's Spirit, connected to God's Spirit, so that he can lead and guide you, and not to ignore obvious signs that he is not for you, you know. And so women do that a lot. We lie to ourselves. We get caught up in the romance and what we want, and so we don't see the things that bite us in the butt later in the beginning. And so anyway, back to my point is that if you can see what effect this guy has on you, and that it's positive, and it matures you and it grows you and things like that, I think that that's a good indicator. And he's showing interest in you, and he's a Christian, I think that that's a good indicator that he could be for you. And so again, you just pray, you ask God, double check, triple check, because the last thing you want to do is get tied up with someone who's not, for lack of a better word, a fool. You don't want to get tied up with a fool, because then it'll make your life miserable. And so so basically, those are the main points that I think you can keep in mind when you are waiting for a spouse. And watch out for those things. Have your checkbox ready, and just, you know, follow God's leading, and then I think you will eventually be led to who God sent for you. You can miss the person, so don't think that whoever God has for you, he's for you. You can miss the person if you're not on guard, if you're not aware, if you're not praying, if you're not watchful. You can miss the person. That doesn't mean God can't bring them back later, or even somebody else, but you must stay on guard. You must stay alert. You must stay watchful. But before I wrap this up, one thing that I want to pinpoint almost as a warning, which I've kind of hinted at throughout the video, is that us women, we need to be very, very careful of our emotions and our desires while we're waiting. The enemy uses these things a lot to not only torment us, but tempt us, to lie to us, of course, deceive us. And so we have to really keep those things in check, reason things out very, very well, use our emotions when necessary, and be on guard, because a lot of the times that women get caught up with men that God did not send, or they get deceived, or they get caught up in sin, is because they let their emotions and desires get away from them. They let their emotion desires take them outside of God's will to try to get what they want, and so to try to get their needs met. And so I think if you are too eager, you are definitely going to find yourself in trouble. You are definitely going to get deceived by the enemy. You are definitely going to walk into something that you were not, like, unaware that you're doing. And so you have to be careful. Keep those things in check. When you're too eager, even the Bible says zeal without knowledge, you know, it's not a good combination. You have to have some knowledge, and it balances out your zeal or your emotions, so that you don't do things out of ignorance, you know, or being deceived, like I said. So another thing that you guys want to keep in mind really quickly before I go, which I just said that, but is that God is all about growth. So while you're waiting, understand that sometimes God's delay, actually, I would say 95% of the time, God's delay is because you need to grow some more. Bringing someone in your life is not an easy thing. It's a task all its own, especially trying to merge your life with someone else's life. And God is a lot of times trying to get us to a spiritually, emotionally, and mentally mature state to be able to handle those things in the right way. You don't have to be perfect in handling them, but you do need to be to a certain level, to the point where those things don't become destructive in the relationship. And so God is, a lot of times a lot of women are like waiting, looking at their watch, waiting. Again, I talk about these things in my book. And like as if God is busy doing something else and they're waiting on him. Each and every time, God is waiting on you. And you need to find out what you need to do to get it together so that he can send you what he wants to send you. So you Pray, ask him, humble yourself, search yourself, find out what is the holdup in yourself, because it's always in yourself. It's never God. God is never the problem. Okay, I hope we all agree on that. God is never the problem. And so we need to find out what it is that he wants us to do to be prepared and ready for what he wants to send us. And so that's it. And I hope these points helped. I hope the insight helped. And I hope, Cynthia, you got something out of it. So thank you so much, you guys. You have a blessed day, and I will see you next time. Bye.